The first question is about, under our theme, mission and older people, is about the words older people. I want you to tell us, Ian, from your particular perspective and role, what this description means to you.
I think it's a difficult term to define because it's not, it can become a generic term. So we start to classify people because they're older, whatever that may mean. And I think there are two definitions I would want to add into that. One is that we're talking here about people aging rather than being aged. And I think that's an important distinction to make. And that's something which we all share. You know, from the moment we're born, we are aging. So there are all sorts of different parameters we then look at in terms of mobility or awareness or experience and positive things like skills and attributes that people bring that are almost defined because they're older, because they've gained so much experience as the years go by. So I think we have to look at it in both those ways. We also live in a time when I think we have to redefine what we mean by older people and what they're capable of and who they are and where they come from. When I'm talking to my own groups in the Guild, and I'm General Secretary of the Guild, that one of the issues that we come up against is people having a perception of what an older person looks like almost. And yet we live in an age when Mick Jagger is 70, you know, and so what do we mean by an older person? And I think we have to look at it in that context. So I think we have to look at older people as, yes, they have particular issues that arise from being older, but at the same time, they are different people. They have different views on worship, they have different theologies, they have different social experiences, they have different family experiences, different domestic experiences, and so on. So while, yes, we're acknowledging that there's a group who are older people, within that there's a very, very rich tapestry of people as well, and that's absolutely crucial. And we can't define people just by their age. So yes, older people have certain issues around them, and all of the panel will explain some of those, but issues about end-of-life issues or your perceptions of faith issues and so on. One example I have is from a conversation that I had with that started our Golden Age project, which we'll talk about later, I think, was with two women who had been in church together for many, many years and were now in their 70s. And one had discovered that her partner was terminally ill. And she said, "This is making me question my faith." And the other one had said to her, "But in a sense, why? Because you've always known about these issues. You knew it could happen to you. Why should it make a difference now that it has?" And she said, "Because it's me." So the questions she was asking within church about faith, end of life, about her own well-being, about her partnership and so on, were very different from the ones that she'd been asking when she was 20 or 30. And I think the church has to be very aware of that we can't just presume because people have been there for 50 years that we can take them for granted, and that we know what they think and we know what they want. Because in fact, their questions, their experience, their own understandings are changing at the same time.
From your perspective and role, what does mission mean when you put it alongside the words older people? Would you like to launch us on in that?
I think I can't disagree with anything that people have said so far. And one of the things that I've been trying to say as we talk about this within our own organisation is that we have to see older people as a group with whom we work, rather than people to and for whom we do things. I think Sandra said earlier, the quote from Harriet Mount, that we are older people, that they are us. And I think that's absolutely crucial. And if we keep that in mind, we start to see how we can actually use the skills, attributes and experiences of older people who are sometimes in need of care, and to a degree maybe in need of care, but still have a lot to bring and a lot to offer to the church. Professor Swinton of University of Aberdeen said during our research project, the Golden Age project, that what we had to think about was how people can be regarded still as having so much to offer. I was talking to a group the other night, maybe about 40 odd people in Stonehaven it was. And if we take the figures that we heard earlier on from Tom, that the average age of church people is 62. In this group it would be more than that. But there's something like 2,500 years of experience in that room. And I want to ask the question, what use are we as a church making of that? How can we bring to bear that whole experience, the skills, the background, the wisdom that's included in that? That's a huge resource. And these are well-able people who are desperate to make use of that. And I want to say more about that in answer to some of the other questions. Mission can be done to older people. You can reach out to older people, and I think there are issues about that because we have a society in which the number of people coming to church has gone down, yet the demographic within that church has actually got bigger. So it's almost a double whammy. So the kind of people coming to church, there's more and more of them around, but they're not coming. They're not involved. How can we give them a place that says, not only can you get something from being part of this organisation and this whole way of life, but also you can give something to it. And I think that's absolutely crucial to what we do, but also to what older people can do for us and with us. So mission, yes, mission is about reaching out, but it's also about using older people to do that reaching out. And another thing that John Swinton had said to us was about older people are now the last vestige, in a sense, of people who can pass on the Christian story. You know, and I use the example of a colleague in one-to-one who said they'd been in a quiz, and one of the questions was, how many disciples does Jesus have? And he said, everyone looked at him and said, you work for the church, you must know the answer. He said, so I had a stab at it and said 12. And that turned out to be the right answer. And that kind of epitomizes where a lot of generations are now, because they're not receiving that Christian story, and not just the facts and the numbers behind that story, but what Christian faith means, what it can offer to them, what they can offer to the church, and so on. So there are many ways in which we can build on and use the experience of older people, which we haven't defined deliberately, I think, today. But how can we make use of all of that background and turn it to a strength, and not just see older people as someone we have to do something for and to?
Thinking of where you come from this morning, what does you as a parish minister, what do others in their role distinctly offer so that people would look to you in terms of mission and older people?
Well, again, I think there's a number of strands, and Maureen's picked up on a few of them there, because there's a great deal of cooperation required here, and I think it's about making the sum greater than the parts. And we've certainly enjoyed partnership and looking forward to expanding that partnership with people like Faith and Older People, with particular congregational connections like Mayfield, Salisbury, and various churches around Kilmarnocks and Kentigern's, not least amongst them, and various other places around the country, and other denominations as well, because our Golden Age project also involved the Scottish Episcopal Church in terms of the diocese in the north of Scotland, and I'm afraid of getting the name wrong, but it's Caithness and that general part of the world. So there's an important thing there. I think as an organisation, the Church of Scotland Guild has a number of ways in which we can get involved in this work with older people, not least because that's who they are again. And one of the things that I think has come as quite a relief to a lot of people is we're trying to give people in our organisation almost permission to be older. They've spent a lot of time saying our numbers have gone down. The only way we can solve that is by getting more young people in. And now we're taking a slightly different tack and saying, actually, what you need to do is make yourself an organisation people want to be part of and can see what they can give to it, what they can get from it, and that maybe the client group you have to look at is older people. And that can mean any age group probably from 50 upwards, by and large. Now, we're not going to say if someone's 18, you can't join us. And there are examples of people who are teenagers actually being part of guilds around the country. But the reality is that we have to look at the kind of people who have the kind of time available, the experience available, the resources available, the wisdom available to actually serve the church. That, from our organisational point of view, says we're not an organisation that's here to serve itself. We're an organisation which was established in 1887 to go out and serve others. And I think that's an ethos we should be trying to push again. As an organisation becomes smaller, it feels more vulnerable, it becomes defensive, so it's quite hard to do that. And there's a super tanker to be turned around there to some extent. But the opportunity lies there for an organisation like the Guild to do what it was designed to do, to serve. And it has three major tenets behind that: worship, prayer, and action. And they're carefully placed in that order. So it's a worshipping organisation which, through prayerful reflection, is then able to take action at a local community level, very directly, or at an international level through our partnership projects. And that can mean anything from some of the Heart for Art things we've seen, which found its origins in this very church, through working with homeless people in urban Scotland, through doing microfinancing projects around Scotland and abroad, right through to working with people building homes for the perpetrators of violence in Rwanda, building homes for their victims. And although our people can't directly go out with their bucket of mortar and their breeze blocks and build those houses, they're able to see theologically why we should be doing that and practically how we can support doing that. So again, that brings us back to the previous question about mission. So I think our organisation is able to do that with individuals and draw on that big pool of people who are there but not members of the organisation. We also, over the last couple of years, have worked with a whole range of people who are in this room actually, on the Golden Age project, and that was a gift at the 125th anniversary of the Guild to the church to help it start to think about some of the issues around this whole business of how we work with, for and to older people. Now that's something that other people are doing bits of, and other people were already building on what that was. I mean, Mayfield Salisbury were already heavily involved in this area of work, and they were able to bring their expertise and their experience to that table. But out of that, we have this document, which is now here. It looks like this, but it's available from Guild Office, that kind of gets people into the way of thinking about the issue. Not just about care for people, but how we can make use of people, how we can deal with the loneliness that older people have, or make use of the skills that they have. And build on that in partnership with congregations, with Crossreach, with Mission and Discipleship, with Church and Society, whoever it may be within our own church, but how we can then together all sort of add a wee thread or a wee piece to the bigger picture. And I think there are huge opportunities there. I mean, in the previous existence, I was General Secretary of what was then called Parish Education, and looking back, it's now essentially part of Mission and Discipleship, but looking back, we were always very keen in how we looked after younger people. We were always happy to appoint a youth worker or a children's worker, and no harm in that. But looking back, I confess, at no point did everyone say, what are we doing about older people? And there's a hint of taking people for granted there that I don't like looking back. And I think maybe that I want to say a wee bit more about this later on, but I think there's a whole area of work that we could be involved in ecumenically and within our own institutions that starts to acknowledge that particular and indeed that majority segment of our congregations. And why are we taking that kind of age group for granted? And rather than doing the kind of things that FIOP have been pushing for many years. But are we more conscious of that? Are there ways that we can start to address the issues around worship, prayer and action for older people?
Thank you. What support do you look to from others to help you to be part of Mission and older people?
I think at a more national level or multinational level, in fact, one of the things that strikes me that might be worth doing, and it builds very much on what FIOP have already been involved in. I spent about 10 or 12 years as a member of a group called the Consultative Group on Ministry Amongst Children, which is an agency of CTBI. I know that Grant's still involved with that. And that seemed to me to be a very, very useful way of not reinventing wheels, where every denomination around the UK and Ireland was coming together to talk about their experience, support each other, but also to share in the development of resources. And it strikes me there might well be the opportunity here, because there are so many threads that need to be pulled together and held together here, that we might think ideally of having a consultative group in ministry amongst older people. And is that something we could bring together? Now, it's difficult because in children's work, because of what I said earlier, there are professional staff out there who can be brought together to be those experts. And we haven't got there yet in churches as far as older people are concerned. But it does strike me there might be an opportunity there to bring another section of our church, the Ecumenical Relations Department in this case, into the discussion as well, because there might well be a way of not reinventing wheels, sharing resources, sharing ideas, bouncing off each other and saying, what are the issues of mission, of working with older people, working for older people, doing things to older people, whatever it may be, but all of those threads together that might resource us all better, rather than have different silos within our own churches. I don't think we're too guilty of that in this subject in here, because this today tells you that. But maybe there's just a wee bit about bringing together the resources, because all denominations are facing the same issues, and all communities are facing the same issues. So maybe there's some wee seed that we could plant there about growing that kind of thing to complement what's happening at a local level.
What is the one message, perhaps out of what we've said, or you've just been saying, I've really been wanting to say this for an awful long time, that you would like to say?
I would like to start the collaboration by agreeing with Maureen.